Welcome to episode 295 of the Working Fans podcast, where WrestleMania weekend was so big. We took like a weekend or like half a week off to bring you this big review episode. And we're going to start by talking about where we started WrestleMania weekend, the live watch along, NXT Stand and Deliver. Before we get
Yes.
into our predictions, overall, what did you think of the show, Dave?
I like Stand and Deliver. Man, I'm just liking NXT a lot right now. And I'm really excited about the future of NXT. We'll get into the show, but I mean, like, just continuing to see the involvement with TNA and now knowing that AAA is like on the horizon. Like, yeah, I'm excited about NXT. But this was a good show overall. We'll get into it, but one match that really kind of stands out for me that, again, it almost amazes me it does, but it's that storyline with the D'Angelo family,
Yeah, from what I heard, it continued on with NXT this week, but you picked that match correctly. A lot of your picks were right for NXT Stand and Deliver. I think you kept it down the middle where I put a little hope into my picks, but Dark State ended up beating the D'Angelo family. You had the turn that you were calling there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had the women's tag match on the pre-show. That's the only one I didn't see, but I know Gigi Dolan and Tatum Paxley won that. I don't know if I picked them or not, but
no, you and I both picked Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because we saw Roxanne Perez and Julia appear on, was it SmackDown and Raw this week?
They were on Raw. And they were on NXT last night as we recorded this as well, too. So, but
I had seen something online where they might be being called up to the main roster because they had like the debut patches on them.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that could be another reason for, Julia dropping that title, when they had that supposed injury.
It's hard to say. Stephanie Vaquer's been all over too. She wrestled on Raw after WrestleMania, and she wrestled on Raw just this past Monday as well. And she's still on NXT too. So, these NXT girls are keeping busy.
Definitely. The NXT Tag Team Championship, Fraxium versus Hank and Tank. This is one that you called right from the beginning. You said Hank and Tank were going to win it. I had that hope that Fraxium would, retain, but, Hank and Tank went on, got that title. Did you watch NXT? See, I haven't watched NXT this week. How'd they follow that up?
Well, I mean, Faxium, as you know, ended up on SmackDown. So they're now a part of the SmackDown roster. Hank and Tank wrestled this weekend. They wrestled against Josh Briggs and his partner from Noah. They got the victory. And now Hank and Tank have actually agreed to help out Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry got attacked by that Dark State group last night because they said they don't care where you're from, you're getting attacked. So it's going to be Joe Hendry and Hank and Tank versus Dark State. And obviously Joe Hendry's kind of got a feud going with Trick Williams too. Trick Williams, we'll talk about later. He got involved on the TNA pay-per-view. So right now, Hank and Tank are kind of just in the middle of it.
Yeah, that was wild. The TNA pay-per-view after that WrestleMania weekend, they did have a show WrestleMania weekend, but it didn't feel huge. I still haven't watched it because there was so much to watch that WrestleMania week. Talking more about TNA, Ethan Page was in that NXT North American Championship match against Ricky Saints. You and I both picked Ricky Saints, but then Ethan Page later went on to be in a triple threat for that TNA Heavyweight Championship at Rebellion. So it's wild more of the crossover we're seeing with TNA now. It's been getting bigger, but it felt huge from having Ethan Page in this spot to go into that TNA show. This match was really a showcase of two guys that Tony Khan let go And
Yeah,
Ricky Saints has been huge since getting in NXT.
absolutely. You got the women's. I don't know if you want to go to the women's four-way. Stephanie Vaquer defeated Julia, Jada Parker, Jordan Grace. All these women, super talented. We talked about Julia making an appearance on Raw. Jordan Grace and Julia are actually wrestling next week on NXT now, and the winner of that's going to face Vaquer at Battleground. So that's how this is getting decided up. But right now, the women's division, NXT, with any of these group is just exciting.
Yeah, you and I both picked this. I feel like Jordan Grace is going to get that title at some point, but especially on this WrestleMania weekend event, Stephanie Vaquer had to get the win, especially since Julia was coming back to, go for that championship. Jada Parker looked great in this match, but it just didn't feel like her time. And if you want to talk about women's matches and not realizing whose time it was, that North American Championship ladder match, that was, would you say, one of the standout matches of the show?
It was a great match, and yeah, I just didn't see Soul being the one to take that title. But happy for her. She's got a lot of talent, and yeah, I'm curious to see how they build her at this title as we continue here.
Yeah, there was multiple spots in that match where I was like, holy shit, they really featured her athleticism. Some of the chances she took on that ladder were amazing. And then the final match, NXT Championship, Obafemi versus Trick Williams versus Javon Evans. Neither of us picked Trick Williams. I thought it was Javon Evans' time. You said Obafemi. Obafemi retained, and now that we're seeing what's going on with Joe Hendry and TNA, you can kind of see why, Trick didn't win this, but
Yeah.
I thought it was a great main event, great way to cap this show. What did you think?
Yeah, no, Oba was the guy I thought. I don't think it's his time to lose it yet. Could Joe Hendry, the TNA champion, be the one to take the title off him? Possible. I think Joe Hendry, it's really hard to kind of predict what he's going to do. As we'll talk later, he's showing up everywhere. So, but yeah, good show for the NXT brand. They continue to really show out.
And talking about Trick Williams going after Joe Hendry, do you think there's a chance we see Trick Williams winning that TNA championship?
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say was I could definitely see Trick winning the TNA championship. And what's going to be interesting too is now that we're having this alliance with AAA, will we see some of the NXT guys maybe win some titles from AAA, or some of these AAA guys come up like Vikingo? With Vikingo, he was on that TNA pay-per-view the other night as well. He was in that Ultimate X match. A guy who had been on WrestleMania, who's part of this AAA deal, because AAA and TNA already had kind of a working agreement. So now it's just even more open.
Yeah, well, we're talking so much about AAA. If you want to see what we thought about Stand and Deliver, watch our Stand and Deliver watch along. The replay is still available on YouTube. And let's talk WrestleMania. But before we get to that, I forgot to mention this at the top of the show, but a lot of people that watch us aren't subscribed. And please, if you enjoy what we do, please hit that subscribe button. Check it out. You'll know the next time we go live. And WrestleMania, big 2-night event. Night 1 we watched just as fans. Night 2 we had the great watch along. Overall thoughts on WrestleMania before we get into breaking down our predictions.
WrestleMania Night 1 to me was an okay show with a really good ending. WrestleMania Night 2 was a pretty good show that I was on my way to really enjoying with a shitty ending. So, take what you will. I think I would have said Night 2 was my favorite night up until the end of it, where I just thought it fell flat.
Yeah, on the face of it, I thought Night 1 was more stacked. I heard some people saying Night 2 was more stacked. Was it Night 1 that we got the AAA news?
Yes, that was available Night 1. We found that out earlier in the day, right during the countdown show, I want to say.
Yeah, that was because I wasn't watching the countdown show, so I had seen something about it. And
Same.
then watching the show, they talk about it, and it's kind of I would say to some degree it almost overshadowed the show itself because it's
Mhm.
such a big announcement.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on WWE buying AAA or
I can see where
acquiring
some hardcore
AAA as
fans
they
wouldn't like it, but I think it's great because you have CMLL already down there. You know, they're a solid, luchador promotion. And AAA, from everything I've seen and heard about, I don't get to watch a ton of AAA, but is not like a very traditional luchador promotion anyway. You know, they have a lot of different matches they do, characters. I know Conan has talked about on his podcast that, he tries to make it a little more show business with, the past elements as well. I think it'll be good for the fact it's going to put more eyes on AAA. AAA will probably end up being on maybe a streaming service like Peacock or Netflix or something. You're going to see AAA talent on NXT, maybe even Vikingo ends up actually being involved in one of the matches here at WrestleMania, right? And what I look forward to really seeing is I don't know if we'll get this at When Worlds Collide, but I think we're going to eventually be building towards a big event where you're going to see a talent like Vikingo versus somebody like a Rey Mysterio. You're going to see the Lucha Brothers. Like they were joking on their podcasts on the Keeping It 100 podcast with Conan, but El Grande Americano versus Ray Phoenix will headline Arena Mexico. But that's not really that silly. That could happen because that's a character that's probably going to get a lot of heat. The real guy under the mask, Chad Gable, can wrestle his ass off. And when you have a legend or a top star like Ray Phoenix or a legend like Rey Mysterio, you're going to be able to pull off probably a pretty big crowd. So I think at least in the immediate future, it's a really good move.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for the best with it. I worry. I don't get to watch a ton of AAA, but whenever I get a chance, I try and buy their Triple Mania shows.
Mm-hmm.
There's good wrestling on it. I'm wondering if it's going to dilute that AAA Lucha Libre style. I like that it hopefully will get more eyes on it. If you could get AAA onto a Peacock, I think that would be cool. Obviously this Worlds Collide show feels so much bigger now with them being included. I can't wait to see the different matchups we get. I'm hoping for the best, but I'm just nervous that it's going to, affect the quality of AAA. It could even affect the quality for the better because there's sometimes some matches on those big shows aren't necessarily the best, but I'm a Lucha fan, so I'm interested to see what's going on. And what I was also a big fan of was night one of WrestleMania, getting back to the topic at hand. But that AAA news just seemed to take over. But going down the list, Jade Cargill versus Naomi. You, myself, and John White all picked this the same. We saw Jade Cargill as winning.
Yep.
Look, I thought it was a good enough match. There were so many other bigger matches on this show that this one was one I was less excited about, but it still really showed out for the event.
Yeah.
You had Rey Mysterio versus El Grande Americano, which turned out to not be Rey Mysterio, but Ray Phoenix. We got the news just before the show. And you picked it right. You had El Grande Americano winning. Myself and John White both thought Rey Mysterio was winning. And even plugging in Ray Phoenix, I would have thought Ray Phoenix would have gotten the win, but I imagine it's to continue this storyline along.
If you had called me out on it that day, I would have changed my pick to Ray Phoenix, just because Ray's so new and he's hot right now. I thought they would keep the momentum going, but I think they really wanted to get some heat on El Grande Americano, Chad Gable here, and I think you're seeing the thing with Vikingo. This is probably going to lead to something, possibly at When Worlds Collide.
a good direction to go. U.S. Championship, Jacob Fatu versus LA Knight. You, myself, John White, we all picked this for Jacob Fatu. There was only one real way I saw that it could go. Like, LA Knight's been huge with it. He's been big in WWE, but Jacob Fatu has had that, momentum behind him. And it was hard not to see him taking that championship home.
All gas, no brakes, baby. Fatu.
World Tag Team Championship, New Day versus War Raiders. You and I picked this wrong. John White picked it right. I was kind of surprised by the New Day win here.
I was not as we got closer. I don't know why. I just got this vibe that things were going to change. But yeah, leading into this, I just felt like it was the War Raiders all day. They had done a good job of rebuilding them as like the top tag team. But there's something about this New Day heel team that I don't know. I don't know who's going to dethrone them.
That's a good question. I'll tell you who didn't dethrone Tiffany Stratton, and that was Charlotte Flair for that WWE Women's Championship. You, myself, and John all called this for Tiffany Stratton. And, I mean, I saw no other way because she had just won it recently. She's been doing great since coming to WWE. Like, I don't know. And when all that stuff popped off between her and Charlotte, I think it was getting more attention on this, but it's like, what were you really going to gain with Charlotte getting that championship back? I think Tiffany would have gotten more from the win, and that's why she got it here.
Yeah, no, good to see Tiffany continue to move on. She's the right choice. She's the star of the future right now.
Jey Uso versus Gunther, the match that kicked off the show for that World Heavyweight Championship. Jey Uso got the win. That place went wild. And you, myself, and John all called this as well.
Yeet. Yeah, got to go with Jey Uso. It was his time. All that merch he's selling, all that crowd reaction. Jey Uso is the man. And I'll talk a little bit about this real quick, kind of before we get into night two. Well, the main event of night one and everything too, because we won't really have a chance today. But the follow-up here where, Gunther basically ended up going after the broadcast team the next night on Raw, where he attacked Cole and then he attacked Pat McAfee and choked him out. Very well done. Interesting match, but also interesting that Jey Uso, his next opponent's going to be a Logan Paul. Logan Paul, they're setting up that. So I'll talk about like two different directions, right? These guys went from feuding each other, kind of going with more like guys that can wrestle, but kind of like that mainstream pop star type thing too. So it'll be interesting to see the future of Gunther and Jey Uso, and will these two meet again sometime down the road?
Yeah, and talk about like the Raw after Mania is always a big deal, but this one, just as big as any. And the main event, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, myself and John White called it.
Yeah.
You were holding out hope for CM Punk, but
I was until
later on that day. Paul Heyman.
Yeah. Yeah, what changed my mind was later on that day I had watched SmackDown and I saw Cody Rhodes lay out Cena for the second time. And I'm like, shit, Cena's going to win. And then I started thinking about how this was going to play. Now, I didn't get it completely right. It made me think that Seth was going to be the architect behind everything. I thought Seth and Heyman would screw over Roman and Punk once I saw, but I thought then Seth was going to go help Cena get the win too. Only the first part of that happened. But yeah, hey, this ended up being a great finish for night one. Very well done. And in retrospect too, probably the best thing they could have done, because I felt like Seth, out of all three of them, probably needed to win a little bit more.
Yeah, night one really had a good ending. I liked a lot of the way the show was. It ran late, so I was falling asleep during that main event, caught it the next day. Best way to end a show. And if you want to talk about endings to shows, night two, we had the live watch along, so you can see our, responses in the moment. But getting to our predictions, AJ Styles, Logan Paul, You and John White called Logan Paul. I was calling AJ Styles. Boy, was I wrong. What did you think of this match?
Not much. I think the positioning was unfortunately at a lull. Like we had, a very hot women's match to open the show. We had a great Intercontinental title match. We had a surprise opponent for Randy Orton. We'll get into all that. All that happened before this AJ Logan Paul match. And so by the time the AJ Logan Paul match came, in a match that I figured Logan Paul was probably going to win, my enthusiasm was already kind of down. I was looking to see maybe if Karrion Kross would do something more than what he did. But yeah, it is what it was.
Yeah, I wasn't all that excited for this going in. Decent enough match. Maybe the storyline coming out of it will, save it. But Sin City Street Fight, Damian Priest versus Drew McIntyre. And I'm pretty sure I said this on the live watch along that this surprised me that it was as good as it was, because I expected it to be, a decent enough match. I didn't think it would stand out much, but these guys really took it to each other. I had predicted Damian Priest. You and John White had predicted Drew McIntyre. Did this match live up to the expectations you had for it, or did it surpass it?
No, I thought it'd be a solid match. It was exactly what I thought. They did good. I'd like to see a little more from Drew personally. Like, part of me wishes maybe he was with Seth and Braun Breaker now in that trifecta storyline, make it like a 4, Dangerous Alliance type deal. But we'll see what the future holds for Drew.
Yes, Intercontinental Championship match. Finn Balor versus Penta versus Dominic Mysterio versus Braun Breaker. John White got this right with Dominic Mysterio. You and I thought Penta was going to take it. I mean, if I was thinking about it honestly, it would have probably been between Penta and Dominic. I thought Penta was going to win it just because since coming in, he has been on fire. He has been doing great. But Dominic Mysterio, got that heat from it, and probably overall was the better pick, because then you can use it to further. Is there a split between him and Finn Balor? Braun Breaker obviously is not hurt losing that title here.
No, Breaker, he ended up felt like he got a promotion after this. Now he's involved in the main event storyline with Seth and Paul Heyman on Raw. They're like tearing up everybody. But Dominic Mysterio, one thing we didn't really pick up on too much because we had to watch on, we had to volume off, is that Dominic Mysterio got, a big babyface response here. Like, this crowd was really behind Dominic for this match for whatever reason. And I'll be interested to see how Dom goes future, but I think Dom has been such a good heel that I think he's starting to win some people over. So I'm kind of curious to see how they continue to book Dom, because they've kind of positioned like Finn's going to be the odd guy out, and you think he'd be the babyface. But if Dom keeps getting these big babyface responses, I'll be curious to see what they do. But this was a big moment, and I was kind of happy in the end of it to see Dom win this title.
Yeah, the one thing, he did come out with a mask on, and we weren't sure whose it was. I believe it was AJ Strangebrew who joined us for the live watch along that said, "Is it Rey Mysterio Sr.?" And it was a Rey Mysterio Sr. mask that he wore out.
Oh, there you go.
We had the Women's Tag Team Championship, Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez versus Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. Bayley obviously didn't make it to the match. We got the big return of Becky Lynch. They had the win that night. They dropped it the next night. And, I don't have a prediction down for you for this. I had myself and John White for Liv Morgan and Raquel. I forgot. Who did you pick for this match?
I had Liv and Raquel because when we picked it, it was Bayley, and I expected Bayley to turn on Lyra. Now, AJ Strangebrew predicted that it'd be Becky and she would turn on Lyra, which he was a day late on, but it did happen. So very interesting. That night, I thought that Becky and Lyra would win just because, the emotion from that crowd, just the way it was going on. I did not know they were going to wrestle again the next night, and then Becky would turn heel. So that caught me off guard. But overall, I thought it made everything a little more interesting. And it was interesting the way everything kind of led up. And I thought it put some more interest on these women's tag belts.
Definitely. Speaking of interest on a women's belt, you had Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley versus Bianca Belair for that Women's World Championship to open the show. This was a great match to open the show with, especially for how things closed out. I think this set like a high bar from the beginning. And you and I predicted Io Sky. John White thought Rhea Ripley would take it. Great match, I thought.
Yeah, AJ predicted Bianca, I think, in this one. He thought she would turn heel. I could see something happening with a heel Bianca down the road. She is injured, I think, after this match. But overall, this match was, in a lot of ways, just in terms of just pure in-ring action, this was probably the best match of the weekend. Like, they just kept a really good high pace, and they kept it throughout the whole match. So Io Sky, she was on NXT last night, by the way, too. She's just been crushing it. She wrestled Stephanie McCurry the next night after this on Raw, and they had a great match up until the interference. But yeah, Io Sky, she's killing it right now.
Definitely. And that main event, undisputed WWE Championship, Cody Rhodes versus John Cena. This was not the match that I expected. John White and I thought John Cena would win this, but it had an interesting pace. And then the way it finished was odd. There's been a lot of talk about it coming out of that. What did you think?
I thought that this match was, I mean, initially I think it was the victim of, we were all just waiting for someone to interfere and for something to happen. You know, we knew that something was going to happen. So and it was the end of the night. So I don't think it was getting any help for that reason. That being said, it's not like they over-delivered in such a way that they compensated for that. And then we got to the finish. We got Travis Scott. And I know we all thought, oh, okay, this asshole again. Where's The Rock, though? And, no offense to Travis, but he was just not the guy, any of us wanted to see. We wanted to see The Rock at least be involved in this. Even if we didn't want to see Cody lose, we still wanted The Rock. So instead, we get Travis Scott involved, who ends up getting laid out anyway. But then Cena just basically, begs off Cody not to hit him with the title belt. Feels like it takes longer than it should. And then Cody throws it, immediately gets kicked in the nuts, hit with the title, and then it's over. And it just felt like in this day and age of wrestling, we're so used to people kicking out all the time too, that I don't know. I just expected more. I was still waiting for The Rock, and none of that happened. And I was really left with wanting more, and not in a good way.
Yeah, this wasn't easy, especially with the sound down for the watch along. It was kind of hard to tell what was going on. They definitely wrestled like a more methodical match. I feel like Cena really was wrestling like a heel, kind of slowing things down. The pace of the match, I don't have a problem with. It was more that ending. And it's not even necessarily Travis Scott being involved, because if you want to have him involved, that's fine. But having him as like that sole person coming out to affect the match,
Right.
That's what was weird, especially when everything else seemed to line up that The Rock was going to get involved. And that's where a lot of the talk afterwards about it was, because I think we even said during the watch along that The Rock said he was in Hawaii. We're like, oh, that's just a cover. And then he doesn't show up. But like the next day he calls into Pat McAfee's show. Now, where do you sit on the Rock thing? Should The Rock have been there? Could they have done things the way could it have been handled any better way if The Rock wasn't gonna show?
Oh yeah. I mean, rather than Rock show up at Elimination Chamber, you should have just showed up at Mania. You should have built this up for a babyface versus babyface, John Cena, Cody run John Cena, really, you could really play off this his last one. We could have all this old footage of him as we lead into this. Cody putting over how much he respects him, and we could tease a little tension here and there where we don't think it's going to go. And then you have The Rock, come out and cost Cody. That would have been so much better. Or just not have The Rock involved at all if you're gonna, you know what I mean, if he wasn't gonna show up at Mania. But I felt like Elimination Chamber was so big that it actually kind of overshadowed Mania because it made our expectations way too high. And I don't know what the deal is with Rock behind the scenes. I don't know. It's interesting. He's made things work, but there's a couple times now where he's kind of screwed things up too. And whether it's his booking, whether it's him, I don't know what the deal is, but there's definitely been some misses.
I know, I think it was on Post. They said if he had just showed a little video of him talking about things before the main event, so you knew that he wasn't going to show up,
right?
That would have adjusted people's expectations, and I think that finish might have hit better. Now, a lot of the times while talking about WrestleMania, we reference the Raw after Mania.
Mm-hmm.
Rusev has returned to WWE on the Raw after Mania, the SmackDown after Mania. We got Aleister Black returning. So these were two big returns that we've been waiting for. And I know you like to do this on the MMA show, so I'm going to give you a chance on the wrestling show. Who's a good future opponent for Rusev, and who's a good, future feud for Aleister Black?
For Rusev, well, it looks like he's going to go heel because he's going to wrestle on Otis. I actually have better ideas for him as a babyface. As a babyface, imagine him and Braun Breaker going at it, or
that would be great.
That would be awesome, right? You could totally do some stuff with him. But since he's going to be a heel, he's on the Raw roster.
I know if he was on SmackDown, I would say him versus Jacob Fatu.
Yeah, Fatu again. Yeah, I almost feel like you go a number of different ways here. But I will see. I'm going to say, I'd like to see him in there with a Braun Breaker at some point.
Who you got for Aleister Black?
Another guy would be CM Punk, by the way, even though it's a totally different matchup. I think the verbiage would be kind of good. Aleister Black. First off, by the way, I thought it was pretty cool that Zelina Vega won her first single women's title right before he came out. So his wife got a championship, and then he came out, which I thought was kind of fun. And Joe, I'm going to hold on one second here. Excuse me. I'm going to say that I'm going to take what you just said about Rusev and Jacob Fatu, and I'm going to flip it. Aleister Black and Jacob Fatu, given Black's educated feet, that could be an interesting matchup.
I like it. I should say, yeah, man. Yeah. I like it.
What?
And now you want to talk about what we liked. We talked WrestleMania, we talked NXT Stand and Deliver, but there were multiple shows on WrestleMania week. How many outside of WWE?
So, a little pause there, you're breaking up, but I think what you're asking me is how many shows did I watch out of this? Bloodsport, which I think we even covered last week because it was on a Thursday. And I talked about how much I enjoyed that. Obviously, Stand and Deliver, WrestleMania. Unbreakable, I saw a little bit of. I know Steve Macklin won the TNA International title. I did not see Joey Janela's Spring Break or the Super Show. But, overall, out of everything I saw, Bloodsport was definitely the show to watch for me. I just continue to like everything they're doing with NXT, New Japan, and all these different talents from around the world.
Yeah, it's great to see all the different groups working together there, all the great matchups. Now, I tried to watch like a little bit of each show. I saw a lot of the Wrestlecon Super Show. I didn't catch any of Unbreakable, but Wrestlecon Super Show, they had a great 10-man lucha match. There was a 6-man lucha match that was great. Minoru Suzuki versus Butterbean was
Heard about
probably
that.
the letdown of the weekend.
Yeah, I heard about that. You know, one thing I have to talk about too, I thought was an interesting angle here was out of Bloodsport was Natalya got into it with Kenzie Page, the NWA Women's Champion, and now Natalya is going to be wrestling for the NWA Women's title on the Crockett Cup. And that's one of the first things the NWA's done in a while that's made me interested in checking out their show.
I know we talk about that's been one of the themes, I think, of the Working Fans podcast of, when we started up, we were so big about NWA Power. And then since they've been harder to watch, we've been saying like how that's been kind of like the biggest disappointment. But seeing that angle, that did give me some excitement to want to check it out. A couple things of note from Joey Janela's spring break. Megan Bain wrestled a wrestler named Bozilla. And what was crazy about this woman is she was about Megan Bain's size. So a lot of the times when we see Megan Bain in the ring, she's in there with a smaller wrestler who she's almost sure to like dominate. And it was interesting seeing her versus someone of about the same size. The big note coming out of this, and I haven't watched the match yet, was Joey Janela versus Sabu in what was supposed to be Sabu's last match. It was a barbed wire match. Some wild bumps. There's one that you've probably seen clips of online where Sabu is like thrown into the ropes and breaks through a board and goes right to the floor. I'm excited for that match just because we've watched Sabu wrestle for years. But I would have to say, of all the shows, obviously Mania and Stand and Deliver stand out. The Wrestlecon Super Show, definitely worth checking out. And Bloodsport will never disappoint.
No, not at all.
And now we are going to our weekly check-in for Dark Side of the Ring. Now, this is Dark Side of the Ring. Is this episode 4 here? The Billy Graham episode?
We had Borga, Tony Atlas, Mick Foley, and Vader. So this is episode 5.
Oh, episode 5.
Yeah.
So I didn't know a ton about Billy Graham coming in. Did you know much about him before this episode?
I mean, I know he was a trendsetter for guys like Jesse Ventura, Hulk Hogan, and even though he probably borrowed some stuff from Muhammad Ali, who borrowed some stuff from Gorgeous George, but when you look at the tie-dye and everything like that, Billy was definitely the man. And it was interesting. I saw Billy Graham in the NWA with his karate pants on and stuff like that towards the tail end of his career. I was watching wrestling, and I saw him make his return to the tie-dye. He was more Don Morocco's manager and stuff in WWF. So I've got to see parts of Billy when I was younger. I knew about the steroid allegations and everything, and I watched him on Donahue and all that stuff when I was a kid. I knew he was kind of carny. I knew he said some outrageous things and was kind of bitter. But overall, what I liked about this Dark Side was it kind of almost felt like a redemption at the end. That despite all the bad things he did, this guy, as Wayne Coleman, he finally made amends with his family at the end. And even though all wasn't forgiven, they could settle down and they could love him, and they could be there for him at the end. And he just appreciated that. And he had, apparently he had made amends with Vince and everybody too. And that was nice just to hear about, that this guy had found peace towards the end.
Yeah, his kids were a standout part of this episode. Obviously with seeing his son had a different last name, that there had to be some trouble between them over the years to cause that. And you get to hear from them why they felt the way they did. But like you said, all wasn't forgiven, but they were able to get past it a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot of the Dark Side of the Ring focused on how a lot of his depression came from losing that championship. And we've heard it a lot about the old WWF that you were told when you were going to get the title, when you were going to drop it. It was detailed in Bob Backlund's book. But it seems like a lot of guys, even going into this, knowing that they're going to lose that championship, they still think that they're going to be able to do something to affect it, or that they're going to be a good enough champion that they'll be able to change the course of events. And we see how it really kind of affected his life. I thought it was interesting to kind of see why that karate fighter gimmick had come about in the NWA as well.
What I didn't know, because I was a kid watching this and I hadn't saw Billy Graham in his prime at the time, but was how much muscle mass he lost when he was doing that gimmick and how bad he actually looked from what he was. The other thing too is, I will say this to Billy Graham's, I don't want to say defense, but Vince McMahon Sr., they seemed to detailed was he was very much, this is the way we're booking. That's it. And nothing was going to change his mind. But if you look at like the amount of business they were doing, you could see where Billy Graham thought, hey, maybe we are going to change course here because we're doing so well. But that wasn't the case. But clearly he wasn't mentally or emotionally ready to be able to deal with that at the time.
Yeah, and what's even tougher is after Billy Graham, you see the company get so much bigger with a guy that had borrowed so much from Billy Graham. So that couldn't have made it any easier. And, that was something that I think Vince Jr. did a little different from his dad was, even if there was a plan, it seemed like he was maybe willing to change things if it showed business would continue. Like how we talked about WrestleMania 9, the week before, how, Hogan was gone, but he brought Hogan back, gives Hogan that championship because he had seen such a positive tick in numbers. So, interesting the way the business changes over the years. And since you have not watched it last night, the episode after Billy Graham is Eddie Gilbert. So we will be talking about this Friday. What are your thoughts going into Eddie Gilbert before you actually see it and see what happens?
Oh, I mean, I'm looking forward to this. Eddie, was a great mind for the business. Everybody you ever hear, guys like Mick Foley, Paul Heyman, they all talk about, the mind Eddie Gilbert had for the business. And, with Eddie working in ECW, Memphis, UWF, NWA, and this, being married to Missy Hyatt and Medusa, like I feel like there's a lot of his stuff in his personal life and professional life. There's just going to be very, very interesting. I'm excited about this one. That's all I can really say.
Definitely. Well, guys, that was episode 296. We are marching along to episode 300. Of note, the Combat Cast just had, what are you guys on, episode 201 now?
201, baby, which means that even though I'm sure I've missed a few, I'm close to 500 episodes here.
That's wild to think about. We've been going strong for 5 years, and as of press time, we don't know what we will be bringing you this Friday, but we will have a good episode planned. And if you guys enjoyed what you saw, please hit that subscribe button. A lot of the people that watch us aren't subscribed, and it would just mean the world to us if you subscribed. And why don't you also check out a couple authors that have collaborated with the Working Fans podcast? Without that old sponsor, it's harder to jump into these commercials. Author Ray Lopez presents Lockup, professional wrestling in our world. Lockup dives headfirst into the colorful world of professional wrestling. Explore the iconic characters, careers, matches, history, and families, and delve into the bizarre and fascinating entwining of professional wrestling and film, television, football, politics, gender, and race. Pre-orders are available now on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com. This is the perfect gift for the wrestling fan in your life. Pick up a copy today on Amazon.
Hey, all you goddamn wrestling fans out there, listen, old black part has got a book. It's called Wrestle Right there. It's got some dadgum good stories in there about some dadgum good wrestlers.
Read stories of Dusty Rhodes, Devon Eric, Scott Casey, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper, Mr. Fuji, Ron Bass, Bruiser Brody, Mike Davis, The Grappler, and many others.
And I guarantee you one thing, that it'll be the best dadgum read you've had in a long, long time.
Get your book today at Wrestleville.com or on Amazon. Wrestleville, it's where wrestling lives.
Hey fans, it's the man they call Dave with producer Joe. And you probably know us as the commentary team for New Heights Pro Wrestling, but when we're not doing that, we got a podcast.
That is the Working Fans Podcast, where we talk pro wrestling, comedy, MMA, and so much more.
And tell them about that signature segment.
Oh, you talk about the 531?
You know I am.
That is a homegrown creation that has been our namesake. And if you want to know our namesake, we got Chevy, AJ Strange Brew, as well as the two of us.
And why don't you go to our channel, like, subscribe, show us some love.
Rate, review, all of it.
Read about the Northern Wrestling Federation in the book presented by Wrestleville.com, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 2. Hear the story of Roger Ruffin, the man who trained Carl Anderson, the Monster Abyss, Jordan Clearwater, Chris Harris, and Jillian Hall.
Plus 45 other short stories, including Jazz, Bobby Eaton, Kamala, Thunder Rosa, Mario Mancini, Scott Casey, PJ Black, Kerry Morton, Sal Renaro, Jeremiah Plunkett, Colby Carino, Bam Bam Malone, and many others.
Get your book today at Wrestleville.com. Wrestleville, it's where wrestling lives.